The air bites deep. It's a cold that gets into your bones. Imagine this. You are a soldier in the winter of 1944. Maybe you're in the Ardennes forest. Snow is everywhere, a thick white blanket covering the world. The trees are skeletons, their branches heavy with ice. Your breath comes out in white clouds that freeze instantly. Every sound is muffled by the snow. It's a beautiful scene, but it's deadly. The cold is more than just uncomfortable. It's a relentless enemy. It saps your strength. It numbs your fingers and toes until you can't feel them. This is the reality of war in winter. It's a fight for survival against more than just the other side. You are fighting the elements themselves. In these conditions, warmth is not a luxury. It is life. A small fire, a working stove. These things are the difference between waking up in the morning and freezing in your sleep. Soldiers huddled in foxholes, bombed-out buildings, or thin canvas tents. Their only defense against the brutal cold was a small, pot-bellied stove. But these stoves needed fuel, and fuel was one of the scarcest resources on the front line. Supply lines were stretched thin. They were often attacked. Getting food, ammunition, and medical supplies to the front was already a monumental task. Getting something as bulky as coal or wood was even harder. Every lump of coal was as precious as a gold nugget. The fear was constant. What happens when the fuel runs out? The thought haunted every soldier. An empty coal scuttle meant a long, dark, and freezing night. A night where frostbite could claim your limbs. A night where your body could simply give up. You would ration your fuel carefully. You would count every single piece of coal. You would try to make it last. But the nights were long and the cold was unforgiving. Running out of heat meant you were exposed. You were vulnerable. It was a silent threat that could be more lethal than an enemy bullet. The fight for warmth was a battle fought every single day and every single night. This desperation was the mother of invention. Soldiers are masters of improvisation. They have to be. Their lives depend on it. When faced with a problem, they find a solution using whatever they have. They needed to make their precious fuel last longer. They needed to stretch a small amount of heat through the entire night. They couldn't make more coal appear out of thin air. So they had to find a way to make the coal they had burned smarter, not faster. This is where human ingenuity shines brightest. In the darkest, coldest moments of the war, a simple, brilliant idea was born. An idea that would save countless lives using nothing more than a sock. Necessity is the ultimate driver of innovation. When you have nothing, you have to get creative. Soldiers on the front lines didn't have engineers or scientists. They had their wits and the gear on their backs. They observed their small stoves closely. They saw how quickly a pile of coal would burn when air could get to it from all sides. The fire would roar to life, provide intense heat for a short time, and then die out, leaving them in the cold for the rest of the night. This was the problem they needed to solve. How do you tame the fire? How do you make it burn low and slow, releasing its heat gently over many hours? The answer came from an unexpected place, their own feet. Someone, somewhere, his name lost to history, had a brilliant idea. What if you could pack the coal tightly together? What if you could restrict the airflow around it? He looked at his gear. He saw a spare wool sock. Wool socks were standard issue. They were thick, durable, and every soldier had them. He took a sock and started packing it with small chunks of coal and coal dust. He didn't just dump them in. He packed them in as tightly as he could, creating a dense, solid brick of fuel. This wasn't just a container. It was a tool. The sock became the vessel for a new kind of fire log, one custom-made for survival. The concept was simple, but genius. The tightly packed coal inside the sock would burn much differently than a loose pile. By limiting the amount of oxygen that could reach the fuel at any one time, the burn rate would slow down dramatically. The wool sock itself was part of the magic. It would smolder and char away slowly, holding the coal briquette together as it burned. Instead of a blazing fire that lasted an hour, this coal sock would glow like an ember for 6, 7, or even 8 hours. It wouldn't produce a big flame, but it would generate a steady, consistent, radiant heat, enough to keep the frost at bay, enough to survive the night. This trick was born from pure, unadulterated need. It wasn't developed in a lab, it was discovered in a freezing foxhole by a soldier who was simply trying to stay alive. It's a perfect example of battlefield ingenuity, using common items in uncommon ways to solve a life-threatening problem. The coal sock wasn't an official piece of equipment. You wouldn't find it in any army manual. It was a secret passed from one soldier to another, a piece of forbidden knowledge that spread through the ranks because it worked. It was a small act of rebellion against the cold, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to give in. The magic of the coal sock isn't magic at all. It's simple physics and chemistry. Fire needs three things to exist: fuel, heat, and oxygen. This is the fire triangle. If you control any one of those three elements, you control the fire. A normal fire in a stove has plenty of fuel, the coal, and plenty of oxygen. Air flows freely around the lumps of coal, feeding the flames. This causes the coal to burn quickly and at a high temperature. It's great for cooking or for a quick blast of warmth, but it's incredibly inefficient if you need that heat to last all night. You burn through your precious fuel supply in no time. The coal sock brilliantly manipulates the oxygen part of the fire triangle. When you pack coal dust and small pieces of coal tightly into a sock, you are drastically reducing the surface area that is exposed to the air. Think of it like a tightly rolled newspaper log versus a crumpled up ball of paper. The crumpled ball will ignite and burn up in seconds. The rolled log, however, will burn slowly from the outside in. The coal sock works on the same principle. The dense packing means that only the very outer layer of the coal briquette can get enough oxygen to combust at any given moment. As the outer layer of the sock and coal smolders away, it creates a layer of ash. This ash acts as an additional insulator, further restricting airflow to the unburnt coal inside. The process becomes self-regulating. The fire can't run away and burn too fast because it limits its own oxygen supply. The wool sock itself plays a crucial role. Wool doesn't burst into flame easily like cotton. Instead, it smolders and chars. This slow charring process helps the coal block hold its shape for a longer period. It essentially becomes a temporary combustible mold for the fuel, ensuring the coal burns as a single solid unit. This method transforms the stove from a fast-burning furnace into a slow-release heater. Instead of a roaring flame, you get a dull red glow. This is the sign of slow, efficient combustion. The heat output is lower, but it's constant and it lasts for hours. For a soldier trying to sleep, this was perfect. It wasn't about making the dugout hot. It was about keeping it from becoming lethally cold. The coal sock was a low-tech, high-impact solution. It turned a limited resource into an all-night lifeline, all by mastering the simple science of controlling airflow. It's a powerful lesson in how understanding the basics can lead to incredible results. Creating a coal sock was a ritual for soldiers preparing for a long, cold night. The process was simple, requiring only materials that were readily available. First, you needed to gather your fuel. This wasn't just about grabbing a few big lumps of coal. The best coal socks used a mix. Soldiers would collect the small broken chips and even the fine black dust from the bottom of the coal sacks or bins. This dust, often considered waste, was a key ingredient. It filled the gaps between the larger pieces, creating a denser, more solid fuel block. Nothing was wasted. Every last bit of combustible material was put to use. Next, you needed a sock. The best choice was a standard-issue thick wool sock. Wool was prized for its durability and its ability to smolder rather than burn. A soldier would take a spare sock, hopefully one without too many holes, and begin the packing process. He would start by pouring in a layer of coal dust, then add a few small chunks of coal, then more dust, another layer of chunks, and so on. He would periodically tap the sock on a hard surface, or use a stick to tamp the contents down. The goal was to make the sock as dense and hard as a rock. It was a slow, deliberate process. The tighter you packed it, the longer it would burn. Once the sock was packed tight, it was ready for the stove. You couldn't just toss it in. First, you needed to get a small, hot base of embers going. You would start a normal small fire with a few pieces of kindling and a lump or two of coal. Once that fire burned down to a glowing bed of red-hot embers, you would carefully place the coal sock on top. The embers would provide the initial heat needed to ignite the sock and the outer layer of coal. The sock would begin to smoke and smolder, and the coal inside would slowly start to glow. It was important not to smother the embers completely, so placement was key. From there, the coal sock did its work. There were no flames, just a steady, radiating heat and a faint red glow from the stove vents. A well-made coal sock could last an entire 8-hour stretch, providing just enough warmth to keep the deadly chill out of a foxhole or cellar. Soldiers would set their sock log before turning in for the night, trusting it to keep them alive until morning. It was a simple, repeatable process that turned the dregs of the fuel supply into a reliable, long-lasting source of heat. This small piece of survival craft was a nightly ritual that meant the difference between misery and survival. The coal sock trick wasn't an isolated phenomenon. It was a classic example of trench art ingenuity that spread organically from soldier to soldier. It likely started in one of the coldest theaters of the war, perhaps on the Eastern Front or during the Battle of the Bulge, where temperatures plummeted far below freezing. A soldier, desperate and clever, figured it out. His bunker mates saw his stove glowing all night while theirs went cold. They asked him how he did it. He showed them. They, in turn, showed the soldiers in the next foxhole. The knowledge spread like gossip, passed along supply lines, carried by soldiers moving to new positions, and shared in hushed tones. This simple survival hack was used by troops from all different armies. American GIs in the forests of Belgium learned it. British soldiers in the Netherlands used it to make their meager rations of coke last longer in drafty farmhouses. German soldiers on the Eastern Front, facing the brutal Russian winter, perfected the technique in their dugouts. It was a universal solution to a universal problem. The trick crossed enemy lines without a word, as soldiers on both sides independently discovered the same principle of survival. It was a testament to the shared human experience of being cold and wanting to be warm. The use of the coal sock wasn't limited to the front lines. As the war dragged on, fuel shortages became severe for civilians as well. In bombed-out cities like London, Berlin, and Dresden, families struggled to heat their homes during the winter. The knowledge of the coal sock trick eventually filtered back from the front. People started using it in their own homes, packing old socks with coal dust from the bottom of the bag to keep a small fire going through the night. It was a way for ordinary people to fight their own battle for survival on the home front, using the same resourcefulness as the soldiers they were waiting for. This method was quietly powerful. It didn't win any battles in a conventional sense. It didn't appear in any official reports or commendations. But its impact was immense. For every soldier who avoided frostbite, for every person who survived a freezing night, the coal sock was a victory. It boosted morale by giving soldiers a small measure of control over their environment. It kept them healthier and fitter to fight. It was a silent, unsung hero of the war, a piece of folk knowledge born from hardship. The stories of its use are personal and small, but when multiplied by thousands, they paint a picture of resilience and ingenuity on a massive scale. The Second World War is long over, but the lessons of survival it taught us are timeless. The coal sock trick is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a practical skill and a powerful metaphor that still has relevance in our modern world. Today, we are surrounded by advanced technology, but we can still find ourselves in situations where the basics, warmth, shelter, water, are all that matter. Think about a prolonged power outage during a blizzard. Think about being stranded while camping or hiking in the cold. In these moments, knowing how to make the most of limited resources can be life-saving. The coal sock principle is about efficiency and conservation. The method itself can be adapted for modern use. While not many of us use coal stoves anymore, the principle of slow-burning fuel applies to wood stoves, which are common in many rural and off-grid homes. You can create a similar effect by packing sawdust and small wood chips into a cardboard tube or a tightly rolled paper log. For campers and outdoorsmen, this technique can be used to make a campfire last through the night without having to constantly feed it new logs. By creating a dense, self-regulating fuel source, you can maintain a small bed of coals that provides warmth and is ready to be rekindled in the morning. It's about thinking like those soldiers. How do I make what I have last longer? Beyond the practical application, the coal sock teaches us a deeper lesson about resilience. It reminds us that the most effective solutions are often the simplest. We don't always need a high-tech gadget to solve our problems. Sometimes, all we need is a different way of looking at the resources we already have. An old sock and some coal dust seem like trash, but combined with ingenuity, they become a tool for survival. This mindset is incredibly valuable. It encourages us to be resourceful, to be creative, and to see potential where others see waste. It's the core of the survival spirit. Ultimately, the forgotten story of the coal sock is a tribute to human ingenuity in the face of adversity. It honors the anonymous soldiers who, in the most desperate of circumstances, found a way to endure. It reminds us that survival is not just about being strong, it's about being smart. It's about observing, adapting, and improvising. As we face our own modern challenges, whether it's a natural disaster, an emergency, or a personal hardship, we can draw strength from these echoes of the past. The spirit of the coal sock is the spirit of making do, of finding warmth in the cold, and of never, ever giving up.